The birthday cake was melting in my passenger seat, and I was about to discover my wife wanted me dead. February in Texas doesn't mess around. The ice storm had turned every road into a skating rink, and I'd been white-knuckling the steering wheel for 40 minutes, dodging jackknifed semis and soccer moms in SUVs who thought four-wheel drive meant invincible. All for Laura's 36th birthday cake, German chocolate, her favorite, from that overpriced bakery downtown. "Happy birthday to me," I muttered, watching the frosting roses slide sideways as I took another careful turn. "Happy birthday to me. I'm Jason Fairburn, and I'm an idiot." The house was lit up like Christmas when I pulled into our driveway in Meadowbrook Estates. Laura's BMW sat next to Candace's red Mustang, both cars pristine, while mine looked like it had been through a blender. I grabbed the cake box and sprinted through the sleet, my dress shoes finding every patch of ice between the car and the front door. I was fumbling with my keys when I heard them laughing inside. "God, I hope he crashes," Laura's voice carried through the window, clear as a bell. I could really use the insurance money. My hand froze on the doorknob. "Or at least a few months of silence," Candace added, and they both erupted in giggles. "That man never stops talking. Blah, blah, blah about his stupid computer clients." I stood there in the sleet, holding a $60 cake, listening to my wife and her sister discuss my potential death like they were planning a shopping trip. "The life insurance would pay off the house," Laura continued, "and I could finally get serious with Scott." Scott. The name hit me like a brick. Scott Williams, her trainer at that fancy gym, the guy she'd been mentioning a lot lately. The reason for all those evening yoga sessions. I set the cake down on the porch table and backed away from the door. My hands were shaking, and not from the cold. "I mean, Jason's sweet and all," Laura was saying, "but he's so predictable. Scott makes me feel alive again, like I'm actually desirable. Plus, he's got that body," Candace chimed in. "Not like your husband's dad bod situation." More laughter. The sound felt like ice picks in my ears. I got back in my car and drove away, leaving the cake to freeze on the porch. In my rearview mirror, I could see the warm glow of our living room windows, where my wife was celebrating my potential demise with her sister. The motel on Highway 6 had a flickering neon sign and rooms that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Perfect for my new reality. I sat on the scratchy bedspread and stared at my phone, scrolling through 2 years of text messages from Laura. "Working late again tonight. Yoga class is running long. Girls' night with Candace." How many of those were lies? How long had she been planning this? I thought about our daughters, Beth and Janie, probably upstairs doing homework, completely unaware that their mother was downstairs wishing their father would die in a car accident. Beth was 12, sharp as a tack, always asking why Mommy was gone so much. Janie was 9, still young enough to believe in fairy tales and happy endings. My phone buzzed. A text from Laura. "Where are you?" "The girls are asking." I turned the phone off. The next morning I was gone before dawn. I packed 2 suitcases, cleaned out half our savings account, and left a note on the kitchen counter. "Heard you talking last night. We need some time apart. The girls can reach me on my cell." By the time Laura woke up, I was already across town, signing a lease on a furnished apartment near Greg's garage. Greg Kowalski had been my best friend since college, the kind of guy who'd help you move a body without asking questions. When I showed up at his shop at 7 a.m. with 2 suitcases and a story that would make a soap opera writer jealous, he just handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Well, shit. What took you so long to figure it out?" "I'm an IT consultant," I said, slumping into his office chair. "I troubleshoot problems for a living." How did I miss this? "Because you're not supposed to debug your own wife, man." Greg wiped his hands on a greasy rag. "Trust me, I saw this coming months ago. The way she looked at you at the barbecue last summer? Like you were something stuck to her shoe. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have believed me?" He had a point. I'd been so busy trying to be the perfect husband, working extra hours to pay for her gym membership, her shopping trips, her sister's constant visits, that I'd missed all the signs, the late nights, the new lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom, the way she'd started showering immediately after coming home from yoga. "So what's the plan?" Greg asked. "I don't know yet, but I'm done being the fool." My phone had been buzzing all morning. 17 missed calls from Laura, 12 from Candace, and 3 from my mother-in-law. I finally answered when Beth called. "Daddy, where are you? Mom's crying and Aunt Candace is yelling at everyone." "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just needed some space to think. How are you and Janie?" "Confused. Mom says you left because you don't love us anymore." The rage that shot through me was white-hot and pure. "That's not true, Beth. I love you and your sister more than anything in the world. This is between your mom and me, okay? It has nothing to do with you girls." "Are you getting divorced?" Kids always cut straight to the heart of it. "I don't know yet, honey. But whatever happens, I'll always be your dad, and I'll always be here for you." After I hung up, I sat in my car outside the apartment complex and made a decision. If Laura wanted to play games, I'd play. But I'd play to win. Rita Gonzalez had the kind of face that could blend into any crowd, and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. She'd been a cop for 15 years before going private, and her office above the bail bondsman on Commerce Street looked exactly like what you'd expect from someone who specialized in cheating spouses and insurance fraud. "So your wife wants you dead, and she's sleeping with her trainer," Rita said, leaning back in her chair. "On a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised are you?" "About a 3, I admitted. I knew something was wrong. I just thought it was a midlife crisis, not a murder fantasy." "They usually go together. Coffee?" The coffee was terrible, but I drank it anyway. Rita spread out a yellow legal pad and started taking notes. "Tell me about Scott Williams." Mid-40s, owns Peak Performance Fitness on Elm Street. Single, drives a black BMW, looks like he stepped out of a Men's Health magazine. "And your wife?" "Laura Staples. She kept her maiden name for work. HR manager at Consolidated Insurance downtown. 36, blonde, ambitious as hell." Rita scribbled notes. "Kids? 2 daughters, 12 and 9. They're the only reason I haven't burned everything down yet." "Smart man. Judges don't like scorched earth when kids are involved." She looked up from her pad. "What do you want from me?" "Evidence, documentation, something that proves what she's doing so I can protect my girls and my assets. That'll be $500 a day plus expenses. And fair warning, you might not like what I find." At this point, I'm expecting the worst. Rita was worth every penny. Within a week, she had a folder thick with photographs, credit card receipts, and a timeline that painted a picture of betrayal so detailed it could have been a documentary. Laura and Scott had been meeting 3 times a week for personal training sessions that lasted 2 hours and involved a lot more horizontal exercise than vertical. They'd been to dinner at romantic restaurants in the next town over. They'd spent a weekend at a bed and breakfast in Austin while I thought Laura was at a work conference. The most damning evidence was a series of text messages Rita had managed to intercept through Scott's ex-girlfriend Monica, who worked at a liquor store and had some serious axes to grind. "Your husband's such a Boy Scout," Scott had texted Laura. "Does he really not suspect anything? Jason's clueless. He thinks I'm getting in shape for him. If only he knew I was getting in shape to leave him. What about the insurance? $200,000. Accidental death pays double. Accidents happen? They do indeed." I read the messages 3 times before the full meaning sank in. They weren't just having an affair. They were actively planning my death. "This is enough for the police," Rita said, watching my face. "No cops. Not yet. I want to handle this my way first." "Your way?" "I spent 15 years being the nice guy, the reliable husband, the one who fixed everyone else's problems while they walked all over me. I'm done with that." Rita raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" I'm thinking Laura wants to play games. Let's see how she likes it when someone else knows the rules. The first shot across the bow came on a Thursday night. Laura was at another girls' night with Candace and their book club friends at Margarita's, the trendy Mexican place downtown. I knew this because I'd been tracking her movements for a week, and because Rita had confirmed that Scott would be joining them later. I walked into Margarita's at 9:30, wearing my best suit and carrying a manila folder. The hostess recognized me. Laura and I had been regulars before everything went to hell. Table for one, Mr. Fairburn? Actually, I'm joining my wife's party. They're in the back room. Laura's face went white when she saw me. The other women, Candace, Mrs. Ellis from down the street, Jennifer from Laura's office, and two others I didn't recognize, looked confused but pleased. They had no idea they were about to witness a public execution. "Jason!" Mrs. Ellis called out. "What a nice surprise! Laura didn't mention you were coming." "Laura doesn't mention a lot of things," I said, pulling up a chair. "But that's okay. I brought some reading material to share." I opened the folder and pulled out the printed text messages. Laura's eyes went wide. "This is from last Tuesday," I said conversationally, holding up the first page. "Scott texted my wife, 'Can't wait to get you on the mat again. You're so flexible.' And Laura replied, 'You bring out the athlete in me. My husband could never keep up.'" The table went dead silent. Jennifer's margarita glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "Oh, but it gets better," I continued, flipping to the next page. "Here's one from Wednesday. Your husband's working late again. Perfect timing for our private session." Laura's response, "He's such a workaholic. Leaves me so lonely and neglected." "Jason, stop," Laura whispered, but her voice had no authority left in it. "And here's my personal favorite from this morning," I said, raising my voice slightly. Scott writes, "When are you going to leave Boy Scout and be with a real man?" And my loving wife of 14 years responds, "Soon. I'm working on an exit strategy that benefits everyone. Well, everyone except Jason." Mrs. Ellis gasped. Jennifer's face had gone from confusion to horrified fascination. Candace was trying to signal Laura to leave, but Laura seemed frozen in her chair. "So," I said, closing the folder and standing up, "I just wanted to thank you all for being such good friends to my wife during this difficult time in her life. It's so important to have support when you're planning to commit adultery and insurance fraud." I dropped a 20 on the table. "Drinks are on me, ladies." "Laura, I'll be in touch through my attorney." The room erupted in whispers before I even made it to the door. By the time I reached my car, Laura was running after me in her heels, slipping on the icy parking lot. "You bastard!" she screamed. "How dare you embarrass me like that?" "Embarrass you?" I turned around, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely amused. "Sweetheart, that wasn't embarrassment. That was just the opening act." The next morning, Scott Williams found his BMW covered in something that smelled like a combination of rotten eggs, fish sauce, and death itself. The smell was so bad that the parking lot outside Peak Performance Fitness had to be evacuated, and the fire department was called to make sure there wasn't a gas leak. I watched the whole thing from across the street, sipping coffee and admiring my handiwork. The stink bomb had been Greg's idea, a mixture of chemicals that were completely harmless but produced an odor so foul it could clear a building. The glitter bomb that exploded when Scott tried to open his car door was my personal touch. Scott stood in the parking lot, covered in rainbow sparkles and gagging from the smell, while his gym members fled the scene. His perfect hair was full of glitter, his designer workout clothes were ruined, and the look on his face was worth every penny I'd paid Greg's cousin Ray for the late-night installation. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're going to pay for this." I texted back, "Looking forward to it." The war was officially on. Laura tried to retaliate by turning the girls against me. She told them I was having a breakdown and that I might be dangerous. She suggested they shouldn't stay overnight at my apartment because it wasn't safe. That backfired spectacularly. Beth was old enough to smell bullshit, and she'd been watching her mother's behavior for months with the sharp eyes of a preteen who was already smarter than most adults. "Mom's lying," Beth told me when I picked them up for dinner on Friday night. "She's been acting weird for months, always on her phone, always going out, always mad at you for stupid stuff." "What kind of stuff?" "Like when you bought her flowers last month, she got angry because they were the wrong color. And when you fixed the garbage disposal, she said you were just showing off." Janie, my 9-year-old, was more direct. "Mommy doesn't like you anymore, Daddy. But we do." Kids see everything. They just don't always understand what they're seeing until someone helps them connect the dots. I took them to Chuck E. Cheese, the kind of place Laura always said was too common for our family. We played games, ate terrible pizza, and I let them stay up past their bedtime watching movies in my apartment. For the first time in months, I felt like a real father instead of a walking ATM. "Can we live with you?" Beth asked as I was tucking her into the pull-out couch. "It's complicated, sweetheart." "Because of Mom's boyfriend?" I froze. "What boyfriend?" "The muscle guy who comes to the house when you're not there. Mom told us he's her trainer, but trainers don't usually kiss their clients goodbye." Out of the mouths of babes. "What else have you noticed?" "He drives a black car like Mom's, and he brought her flowers last week. The right color ones." The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. Laura showed up with a lawyer who looked like he charged $1,000 just to shake hands. I showed up with Rita's folder and a legal aid attorney named Patricia Chen who specialized in father's rights cases. Laura's lawyer painted me as an unstable husband who'd abandoned his family and was now stalking his estranged wife. He had photos of Scott's car, witness statements about my erratic behavior at the restaurant, and a psychological evaluation suggesting I was having a midlife crisis with dangerous overtones. Patricia Chen waited for him to finish, then stood up, with a smile that could have cut glass. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that Mrs. Staples has been conducting an extramarital affair for approximately 6 months, during which time she has repeatedly left her minor children unsupervised while engaging in activities that constitute adultery, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and child endangerment." The folder hit the judge's desk like a bomb. The text messages were bad enough. The photos of Laura and Scott at restaurants and hotels were worse. But the real knockout punch was the recording Rita had made of Laura and Candace discussing their exit strategy over lunch at the country club. "If Jason just disappeared, I'd be rich and free." Laura's voice came through the courtroom speakers clear as a bell. "Scott says accidents happen all the time to men who work too much and don't pay attention to their surroundings." Judge Martinez looked like she'd just bitten into something sour. "Mrs. Staples, do you care to explain this recording?" Laura's expensive lawyer suddenly looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Your Honor, that recording was taken without my client's consent. In a public restaurant, Counselor, there's no expectation of privacy." Judge Martinez turned back to Laura. "Mrs. Staples, are you currently engaged in an extramarital affair?" Laura's silence was answer enough. "Temporary custody of the minor children is awarded to Mr. Fairburn, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Staples pending a full investigation into these allegations. This court is also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges." Laura's face crumpled. Candace, who'd been sitting in the gallery, stood up and started yelling about lying husbands and corrupt judges until the bailiff escorted her out. I walked out of that courthouse with my daughters and a court order that gave me everything I'd asked for. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The neighborhood block party was Meadowbrook Estate's biggest social event of the year. Every February, despite the unpredictable Texas weather, the Homeowners Association rented a pavilion in the community park and threw a party that was part potluck dinner, part gossip session, and part social battlefield where reputations were made and destroyed. This year, I was planning to destroy a few. Laura still lived in our old house. The court had granted her temporary residence pending the divorce settlement, and she'd been working overtime to rehabilitate her image. She'd been telling anyone who'd listen that I was the one having an affair, that I'd abandoned my family for a midlife crisis, and that she was the victim of a vindictive husband who couldn't accept that their marriage was over. Some people believed her. Laura had always been charming, and she knew how to play the wounded wife role to perfection. But the smart money was on me, especially after word got out about the custody hearing. I showed up to the block party with Beth and Janie, a casserole dish full of Greg's famous chili, and a portable speaker system that I'd volunteered to provide for the evening's entertainment. "Daddy, why is everyone staring at us?" Janie whispered as we walked through the pavilion. "Because we're the most interesting family in the neighborhood right now," I said. "Just smile and wave." Laura was holding court near the dessert table, surrounded by her usual circle of supporters: Candace, Mrs. Patterson from 2 streets over, and Jennifer from her office. She was wearing a black dress that screamed "grieving widow," and enough makeup to cover the stress lines that had appeared around her eyes over the past month. Scott was nowhere to be seen. According to Rita's latest report, he'd been laying low since the stink bomb incident, trying to rebuild his business and avoid any more public humiliation. I set up the sound system and started playing background music, classic rock, nothing controversial. The party proceeded normally for the first hour. People ate, drank, and gossiped about everything except the obvious elephant in the room. Then it was time for the annual raffle. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced into the microphone, "it's time for our door prize drawing. This year's grand prize is a weekend getaway to Austin, donated by Meadowbrook Travel." I reached into the raffle box and pulled out a slip of paper. "And the winner is—" Actually, before we announce the winner, I have a special presentation for everyone. A little audio entertainment that I think you'll find fascinating. Laura's face went white. She started moving toward the exit, but Candace grabbed her arm and whispered something in her ear. "This recording was made last week at the Riverside Country Club," I continued, connecting my phone to the sound system. "I think it really captures the spirit of our community." Laura's voice filled the pavilion, crystal clear and unmistakable. "The insurance money would set me up for life. Scott and I could travel, maybe buy a place in Colorado. All I need is for Jason to have an accident." The party went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the concrete floor. Candace's voice came next. "What kind of accident?" "Car accidents are common in ice storms. Or maybe a break-in gone wrong. Scott has some friends who owe him favors." The crowd was staring at the speakers like they were watching a train wreck in slow motion. Mrs. Patterson's mouth was hanging open. Jennifer had gone pale as a ghost. But the best part was still coming. "The only problem is the kids," Laura's voice continued. "Beth's getting suspicious, and Janie asks too many questions. I might have to send them to live with my mother until things settle down. Or until Jason's out of the picture permanently," Candace added with a laugh. "Exactly. Then I can start fresh with Scott. New life, new money, no baggage." I turned off the recording and looked out at the crowd. 200 people staring at me in complete silence. "So," I said into the microphone, "anyone want to buy a raffle ticket for next year?" The pavilion erupted in chaos. Laura was crying. Candace was screaming at me. And half the crowd was pulling out their phones to call their friends and neighbors who'd missed the show. Mrs. Ellis, bless her heart, started a slow clap that spread through the crowd until the entire pavilion was applauding. Laura pushed through the crowd and ran for the parking lot, with Candace chasing after her. I packed up my sound system, collected my daughters, and went home to my apartment. By the time we got there, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from people who'd been at the party. The best one was from Greg. "Dude, you just became a neighborhood legend." But the war wasn't over yet. Laura and Scott were down, but they weren't out. And desperate people do desperate things. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. Beth's voice was scared and small through the phone. "Daddy, Mom and Aunt Candace took us to a cabin. They said we're having a family weekend, but something's wrong. Mom keeps crying and making phone calls, and there's a man here I don't know. I was out of bed and getting dressed before she finished talking. Where are you, sweetheart? I don't know. We drove for a long time. There's a lake and lots of trees. The man has a black car like Mom's. Scott. The bastard had convinced Laura to take the girls and run. Are you safe? Are you hurt? We're okay, but we're scared. Janie's crying, and Mom won't tell us when we're going home. I'm coming to get you. Keep your phone hidden and stay close to your sister. If anything happens, call 911 immediately. I called Rita while I was driving. She was already awake, monitoring police scanners and tracking Laura's credit card usage. They're at Lake Buchanan, she said. Scott's got a cabin up there. Remote location, one road in and out. Perfect place for someone to disappear. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you call the cops and let them handle this. The girls could be hurt if this goes wrong. The girls could be hurt if you go in alone. But I was already on Highway 183, pushing my Honda as fast as it would go through the pre-dawn darkness. The storm that had been threatening all week was finally moving in, and the first drops of rain were hitting my windshield. The cabin was exactly what you'd expect from someone like Scott. Expensive, isolated, and designed for privacy. Laura's BMW and Scott's black sedan were parked in the gravel driveway. Lights were on in the main room, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. I parked a quarter-mile down the road and walked back through the trees, staying off the gravel path. The rain was coming down harder now, and lightning was starting to flash in the distance. I could hear voices through the cabin's thin walls. Laura was arguing with someone, Scott, probably, while Candace was trying to calm her down. This is insane, Laura was saying. I can't just disappear with the girls. Jason will call the police. He already knows too much, Scott's voice replied. The recording, the custody hearing, all of it. We're past the point of no return. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stick to the original plan. Jason has an accident. You collect the insurance money, and we all live happily ever after. And the girls? The girls will adjust. Kids are resilient. I'd heard enough. I pulled out my phone and started recording as I moved closer to the window. You're talking about murder, Laura said, her voice shaking. I'm talking about survival. Your husband has made it clear he's not going to just go away quietly. He's going to keep fighting, keep digging, keep making trouble. The only way this ends is if he's out of the picture permanently. I can't be part of killing someone. You already are part of it. The insurance fraud, the planning, the recordings, you're in this up to your neck. The only question now is whether you want to be rich and free, or poor and in prison. Through the window, I could see Laura sitting on the couch with her head in her hands. Candace was pacing back and forth, and Scott was standing over both of them like some kind of criminal mastermind. My daughters were nowhere to be seen, probably locked in a bedroom somewhere, scared and confused. I had enough evidence to put all three of them away for conspiracy, kidnapping, and attempted murder, but I wanted more. I wanted them to destroy themselves completely. I called the local sheriff's office and reported a kidnapping in progress. Then I called Rita and told her to bring backup. Then I walked up to the front door and knocked. Scott answered with a gun in his hand. Well, well, he said, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. Jason Fairburn. Right on time. I'm here for my daughters. I'm sure you are. Come in. We were just talking about you. The cabin's main room was rustic and expensive, all leather furniture and mounted deer heads. Laura was still on the couch, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past month. Candace was by the fireplace, holding a poker like she was ready to use it. Where are Beth and Janie? Safe, Scott said, gesturing with the gun for me to sit down. For now. This is kidnapping, federal crime. You're looking at 25 to life. Only if there's someone left to press charges. Laura looked up from the couch. Scott, you said we were just going to talk to him. Change of plans, sweetheart. Your husband's been a very bad boy. All that evidence he's been collecting, all those recordings and photographs, someone could get the wrong idea. The wrong idea about what? About whether you're a loving wife who made a mistake or a cold-blooded killer who planned her husband's murder. The gun was pointed at my chest, but Scott was standing too close to Laura and Candace. If he fired, he might hit them too. Amateur mistake. So what's the plan? I asked, keeping my voice calm. You kill me here and make it look like an accident? Car accident on the way home. Tragic end to a family dispute. Laura inherits everything. The girls get a new daddy, and everyone lives happily ever after. Except me. Well, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. That's when I heard the sirens in the distance. Scott heard them too. His face went from confident to panicked in about 2 seconds. You called the cops. I called everyone. FBI, state police, local sheriff, probably the fire department too. This place is going to be crawling with law enforcement in about 5 minutes. Then I guess we need to speed up the timeline. Scott raised the gun, but before he could fire, the front door exploded inward and 3 sheriff's deputies came through, with weapons drawn. Drop the weapon! Drop it now! Scott spun around, trying to decide whether to shoot me or the cops. In that moment of hesitation, I tackled him from behind, sending both of us crashing into the coffee table. The gun went flying. Scott was bigger than me, but I was angrier, and anger can make up for a lot of size difference. We rolled around on the floor, throwing punches and trying to get control of the situation until one of the deputies tased Scott and put an end to the fight. Are you Jason Fairburn? The lead deputy asked. That's me. My daughters are here somewhere. Are they safe? We found them in the back bedroom. They're scared but unharmed. Beth and Janie came running out and threw themselves into my arms, crying and talking at the same time. They were okay. Shaken up, but okay. Laura was sitting on the couch in handcuffs, staring at the floor. Candace was arguing with another deputy about her rights. Scott was face down on the floor with a taser burn on his back, groaning about police brutality. Daddy, Beth whispered in my ear, we knew you'd come for us. Always, sweetheart. Always. The storm outside was getting worse, with lightning flashing every few seconds and thunder that shook the cabin's windows. But inside, everything was finally quiet. Rita showed up 20 minutes later with a team of FBI agents and enough evidence to put Laura, Scott, and Candace away for a very long time. The recordings I'd made at the cabin were just the icing on the cake. Conspiracy to commit murder, Rita explained as we watched the 3 of them being loaded into separate police cars. Kidnapping, insurance fraud, child endangerment, they're looking at decades in federal prison. What about the girls? Full custody, no question. Laura won't be eligible for parole until they're adults. I stood on the cabin's front porch, holding my daughters close and watching the police cars disappear into the storm. The rain was coming down in sheets now, washing away the last traces of the worst night of our lives. Is it over, Daddy? Janie asked. It's over, baby girl. We're going home. All of us? All of us. We drove back to Austin through the storm, the 3 of us together in my Honda, leaving the cabin and everything that had happened there behind us. The radio was playing classic rock, the girls were singing along, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were going to be okay. Laura got 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Scott got 30 for the gun charges. Candace got 15 as an accessory. The insurance company paid me a settlement for the fraud attempt that was large enough to buy a house with a big backyard and enough left over for the girls' college funds. We moved to a different neighborhood, away from Meadowbrook Estates and all the memories. Beth and Janie started at new schools, made new friends, and slowly began to heal from everything they'd been through. And me? I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's just surviving long enough to watch your enemies destroy themselves. 6 months later, I was coaching Janie's soccer team and helping Beth with her science fair project when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. I showed it to Rita, who traced it back to a burner phone purchased near the federal prison where Laura was serving her sentence. Want me to look into it? She asked. Nah, I said, deleting the message. Let her try. I'm not the same guy who drove through an ice storm to bring her a birthday cake. That guy was too trusting, too naive, too willing to believe the best in people. And the new guy? The new guy knows how to fight back. I turned off my phone and went back to helping Janie with her homework. Outside, it was starting to rain again, but inside our new house, everything was warm and bright and safe. Laura wanted me dead, but I was more alive than I'd ever been, and that was the best revenge of all.